Well, hello everyone. It is Friday the 13th of August 2021. And I am your host for today's Status Chat, Dale Delridge, Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And we have our numbers we'll get to, just like we always do. And we'll do that old pesky advert we stick in there to keep real estate commission happy. I have some potentially good news and bad news, depending on how you want to look at it. It is Friday the 13th. Fannie Mae has a new policy out, and I have deja vu all over again. So let's get right to that. Now, I take this from the National Mortgage News, August 11, 2021, by Paul Sinapani. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Headline, Fannie Mae to include rent payments in underwriting. That's partially false right off the bat, and I hate to play Facebook from the headline, but it just gets worse from there. Fannie Mae will factor rental payment history into its mortgage decisioning starting September 18th, the government-sponsored enterprise announced Wednesday. Partially false. I'll explain. Fannie Mae's desktop underwriter, I believe that's the software that they use, will identify consistent rental payments over the most recent 12 months to give historically underserved populations a more inclusive measure of borrowers' fiscal health. Well, that's misleading if not directly false. Here's the problem in this paragraph. We may read it a couple of times. The rental history incorporation can only weigh positively in a consumer's credit assessment. Credit is a double-edged sword. It is a defensive cut when we can prove that we're dependable and pay things on time. It is an injurious cut when we cannot prove that we pay things on the time, or if things look maybe a little sketchy, a little questionable, because either we have a proven history of dependable paying our bills or we don't have that. That's how the credit score works. It goes up and down. Let's start this again. The rental history incorporations can only weigh positively in a consumer's credit assessment, said Malloy Evans, Executive Vice President and Head of Single Family at Fannie Mae. If the applicant had missed any payments from the last 12 months, the rent consistency does not get factored into the approval process. Let's reread that in its entirety. The rental history incorporation can only weigh positively in the consumer credit assessment, said Malloy Evans, Executive VP of Single Family at Fannie Mae. If the applicant had any missed payments from the last 12 months, the rent consistency does not get factored in the approval process. We're ignoring the other edge of that sword. The payment gap could indicate the renter paid using credit card or cash, he explained in an interview. Well, that's some doublespeak right there, because there's several problems in this paragraph right off the bat. If you are using a credit card to pay your mortgage, I believe we'll find that using credit to pay mortgage is mortgage fraud. I believe we'll find that's true. So if you're already having to borrow off your credit card to make your mortgage, to make your bills, you've got a problem. That should be weighed into your assessment of your ability to pay. And if you're using cash, there should be a documented record for that. You should still see it as a payment on time. Would we not think that? So there's some doublespeak in this paragraph, and just for repetition, let's hit it uninterrupted top to bottom. The rental history incorporation can only weigh positively in a consumer credit assessment, said Malloy Evans, Executive Vice President and Head of the Single Family at Fannie Mae. If the applicant had any missed payments from the last 12 months, the rent consistency doesn't get factored into the approval process, since the payment gap could indicate the renter paid using a credit card or cash, he explained in an interview. There is your problem. Deja vu all over again. We saw from the crash of 2008 and the recovery through 2010 that partially what caused this was selling people houses when they were not prepared to by them when they did not have the credit history or the income. Many factors involved, but I cannot think of anything more brutal that we can do to another human being in the home buying process than to sell them a home they're not ready to take over. They're not ready to buy. Because in some cases, if you have to go bankruptcy, it may take you 7 years to get over that. It may take a lifetime to get over the emotional scars that are placed on you when you fail at a given thing, such as losing your home. This is just horrible policy in my mind, because we all have a credit score. We all know how the game is played. We need to play that game. And when we have a proven history that we can support our purchases, that's what we need to do. And to take this that only gives you a positive, that doesn't give you the negative to go with it, is itself biased in the decision-making process. Now let's read on. Okay. The program doesn't alter traditional credit scores. Instead, it is used as a separate vector for approval in the decisioning process, according to Brian Francois, Form Free's Chief Technology Officer. Well, I'm not really sure if it's not affecting underwriting. Why are we considering it? Including rental payments in a borrower's assessment doesn't expand or loosen underwriting standard. It only increases access to home ownership by widening the pool of potential borrowers, Evans said. That sounds like doublespeak to me, because if they're failing in underwriting because they cannot qualify, because they have a history of missing payments, how is this not a part of underwriting? It's even included in the program that Fannie Mae uses to assess the creditworthiness, or the loanworthiness, I should say. In a sample of recently denied mortgage applications from renters, Fannie Mae's analysis found that 17% would have been approved with this new desktop underwriter. Again, if their underwriting software, if the underwriting standards are not being monkeyed with, why are we doing this, and how is desktop underwriter allowing this to go through if we're not changing the underwriting standards? This is doublespeak. If you can understand what they said and explain it to me, please do. Considering rent will allow more consumers to demonstrate a responsible payment history. How can it do that if you're not taking in when they don't pay? As a result, decrease their risk assessment as part of the home buying process, said Marita Wilson Spotster, Director of Housing Policy for the Consumer Federation of America. I don't know how this works if you don't get both edges of the sword. If we want to take your credit payment of your rent into consideration, we must then, by logic, take your non-payment of rent into consideration. Fannie's new underwriting aligns, here they're even saying it's in the underwriting, aligns with the Biden administration's initiatives on increasing the rate of home ownership and the enforcement of fair housing rules. Now, I'm all for fair housing. I'm all for the individual. In fact, I've even taken a course with the National Associations of Realtors, the Realtor University, called At Home with Diversity. I've studied diversity. But changing the underwriting to qualify people who can't qualify is deja vu of the crash that we saw happen in 2008. I don't want to see people hurt. I don't want to see people demoralized. I don't want to see them feeling that sense of failure if they in fact get into a home that they lose because they were not in shape. I would rather serve a client 6 months later than today, when he's in a healthy position to do so, than to perhaps take advantage of a situation where shortcuts are made. And that's what this feels like this is. If they're modifying their underwriting to take only the positive side of rental payments and ignore when they don't pay, that seems to me to be, on its face, unjust. Now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and hit that commercial bit, get that one done with.
Hello, I'm Dale Delbridge of Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. If you are currently unrepresented and would like to know how to compare up to 3 properties side by side and room by room, then go over to my new YouTube channel, Call Dale to Sell. That's 1 L and Dale, no spaces. Watch the demo on Real Scout and then call me and we'll set up your exclusive ad-free account today.
Okay, what is your takeaway from that? Well, your credit is your public reputation for being dependable, your history, if you will, of paying things back when you have an obligation you need to meet. Either you're ready to buy a home because you have the credit or you don't have the credit. That's the way it is. Now, sometimes the credit score will adjust up and down on what loans are made on. That's fine. We're not talking about doing that here. Whatever we have should be universal. We play the game by the rules that are out there, and your credit score is it. Either you're able to pay it back or you're not. Now, what this is talking about doing is kind of fudging some numbers in a way in the underwriting process, because either you had the score to buy that home or you didn't have the score to buy that home. This is now going to say we're not going to add rental history into credit, but somehow we're going to give you credit for doing what you should have been doing the whole time, which is paying your rent. And we're going to ignore the fact if you've been not paying your rent on time. See, you can't have it both ways in my mind. If you want to add rents to the credit process, then give it to them. But if 17% of the population couldn't qualify for a mortgage, there's probably a good reason for it, being as it's not showing up in their credit. If we can make them now a loan when they didn't have the score and couldn't stand on their own 2 feet, it feels like nearly 1 in 5 people are setting themselves up for failure. It looks like we're setting them up to be a victim of the loss, because the credit history is your reputation for paying things back. And if either you've been doing that or you haven't been doing that, either you're ready to buy a home or you're not ready to buy a home. This is disturbing to me. All right, let's look at the numbers. Last week we had 95, 96 in opportunities, increased slightly over the previous period, 47, 28, decrease in the under contract still showing just a little bit, for an integer ratio remaining unchanged at 50%. Now 98, 58 were the opportunities we had this week, slightly up, just like last week, and we had 47.03 in the under contract still showing slightly down, just like it was the previous week, and the integer value of the ratio between them did drop to 48%. So you take anything you hear from me with a grain of salt, verify it, cogitate over it, sleep on it, see if it makes sense to you, do your own research. It's your life, you're in charge of it, not me. I'm just here to present you some food for thought.